Welcome to Season 4 of Far Reach Voyages, where we share our love of sailing and adventure travel. In Episode 1 of Season 4, we went back and revisited the 2009 to 2015 rebuild of the Far Reach, from a gutted hull and deck to what I consider my ideal voyaging boat. In the last episode, I described a year-long project in 2020 to 2021 to install a small diesel engine with a folding propeller after sailing the Far Reach for about 5 years and 7,000 miles, essentially engine-free. The episode ended after we relaunched the boat and completed a sea trial of the new engine and propeller. In this episode, I'll describe several additional projects and modifications we completed to get the Far Reach ready for her third round-trip voyage from North Carolina to the Virgin Islands. During the engine project, there were other supporting projects I didn't describe to avoid complicating the engine narrative. One of these was to rebuild the wood frame for the port cockpit locker. I had removed the framing during the 6-year rebuild and reglued it with epoxy and reinstalled it, but it had recently failed. I decided to build a new frame using Iroko. Instead of epoxy, I used Aerodux 185, a high-quality resorcinol adhesive I prefer for wood joinery exposed to the elements. The next project was to install an electronic depth sounder. Though I had been quite happy with my tried and true lead line with an engine and a larger solar array, it just made sense to install a sounder. I chose the Raymarine I-50 depth sounder for its reputation and large daylight readable screen. However, I didn't want to drill a hole in the hull for the transducer. By taking a few special steps and pairing it with a specific transducer, I was able to mount it inside the hull on an epoxy leveling plug I poured myself. Mounted in this way, the depth sounder is quite accurate and there's no hole in the hull. I built the removable box and trim for the back and the wiring and varnished it. I wired the sounder into the panel and at the same time made sure all my previous wiring was properly marked and bundled in a tidy manner. The depth sounder project will be the subject of a detailed article in the August 2023 issue of Practical Sailor magazine. One of the advantages of installing the fuel fill right above the tank is you don't need an electronic sending unit and instead can rely on a never-fail, accurate sounding stick. When I filled the tank for the first time, I carefully marked the sounding stick so I can determine how much fuel we have. I enjoyed our original Pram-Hood we built to a design created by Lynn and Larry Party, in which we used for 5 years and thousands of offshore miles. It was simple and affordable to make, and it worked well. But I wanted a little more room and improved visibility. I made several drawings till I found the design that I thought looked about right. And then I built an accurate mock-up of our companionway opening and then made a working prototype for a new foldable frame. I tested it out on the boat to check the measurements. Satisfied I had the frame welded by a trusted fabricator out of 3/16 stainless steel. Next, Interbanks Canvas in Oriental, North Carolina did a great job making the fabric hood with 5 windows. It's easy to install and remove, and it has more room and visibility than the original hood. When removed, it stows nearly flat in a small space. This project is the subject of a detailed article in the July issue of Practical Sailor. For 5 years, I used a set of antique oil navigation lamps that I modified slightly so they would stay lit even in a gale. They never failed me. I felt they met the requirements for non-electric nav lights as permitted in Annex 1, subsection 11 of the coal regs, especially since I didn't have an engine to generate electricity. But now that I had a capable diesel engine, it made sense to install 12-volt navigation lights. I found a set I liked made out of brass that fit well with the design of the Far Reach and modified them to accept a non-RF emitting LED bulb sold by Dr. LED. One of the advantages of rebuilding your boat is you can make modifications that production boats never have. One of the ones I made during the rebuild is the ability to easily remove all the water tanks. This simple feature allows you to scrub them clean but also wash the bilge, keeping the boat smelling clean and fresh. It takes about an hour to remove all the tanks from the far reach, including the gray water tank. We do it every year, and this year was no exception. We sailed the boat in the summer of 2021 locally so we could test our projects. But in August, we hauled the far reach out till late October for the worst part of hurricane season in the Carolinas, which also gave us some time for a couple of weeks of overland adventure travel in our Jeep. I made use of some teak offcuts and bronze scraps I had in the shop by making a portable binocular rack to better secure the binos and make them more accessible at the same time. I normally stow the rack on the starboard quarter berth frame, but it also fits perfectly on the cockpit combing. On every boat that I've ever been on, when the companionway is framed with varnished teak, the top of the rails suffer a lot of wear and the varnish is soon damaged. The far reach is no different. I wanted to prevent that annoying trouble. So I used a router to cut down the top of the frame and glued and screwed in a bare teak cap that stands proud of the varnished wood around it. Now I can rest my arms on it and grip it with tools in my hand without damaging it since the cap remains unvarnished. I had long wanted a way to secure books on the nav station regardless of how few books were being stowed there. So I made an adjustable book bracket from juniper. By leaving part of it unvarnished, it's resistant to insects and it smells good too. It was a small, easy project that keeps books organized and brings pleasure every time I see it. Next, I upgraded the solar system. I'd got by fine for 5 years with a single AGM house battery and a thin 30-watt solar panel run through an MPPT controller. But the panel was not that durable, and I was already on the second one. I didn't want an expensive arch or anything like that to clutter the exterior of the boat. Less is more. I chose an efficient American-made glass panel about 30% thinner than a regular panel. It came with a 10-foot cord, so I could continue to move the panels around and keep them in the sun as I had before. I fabricated a fiberglass deck connection box with the same style connector I previously used. I mounted the box on the cabin top under the dinghy and ran the wire down the brass stanchion that supports the saloon table and then back to the battery. Being able to move the panels around means I can often produce the same or more electricity than a fixed panel of larger capacity because I can keep them in the sun. The trick was to figure out how to secure the panels to the boat, and I did that by mounting them to 1/4-inch acrylic panels I bought from McMaster Carr and edging them with a rubber sleeve. I drilled holes in the acrylic for lanyards, which enabled me to secure them to the dinghy or wherever I wanted based on the location of the sun. I also installed a second solar switch and an MPPT controller so the panels are wired independently. That way if one panel is shaded, the other is still working and charging the house bank. In the Season 3, Episode 9 video, I discussed my simple one-way communications capability. I was unhappy with the reliability of the otherwise affordable and simple Spot satellite text unit, which sent my GPS location to family as well as to Chris Parker, our weather router. Somewhat reluctantly, I chose to replace the one-way Spot with the highly regarded Garmin two-way inReach. The service plan for the Garmin cost 4 to 5 times that of the Spot. But this kind of intrusive technology can lead you down the path of unwanted distraction and change the nature of your voyage. More on that topic another time. With the possibility of an unfortunate scheduling conflict that had to be resolved, I was unsure all the way up to 14 November if I was going to be able to depart in time to make the voyage to the West Indies at all. But once we had the solution, we launched the boat right away on 17 November 2021. I had about 2 weeks to prepare, which given my familiarity with the boat and her simple systems was not a significant concern to me. However, there was still one major obstacle to overcome. I had started having problems with the Cape Horn wind vane and had not been able to figure out why it was suddenly performing poorly in light wind. Without the wind vane working perfectly, there could be no offshore voyage. Would I be able to figure it out given I had tried every solution I could think of? Well, to find out what happened, join us in the next episode of Far Reach Voyages. If you enjoyed this episode of Far Reach Voyages, let us know in the comments. Also, consider liking and subscribing, as it tells us you would like to see more videos and it helps the channel grow. See you next episode.